All right, everybody. My name is CJ Abernathy, and I appreciate everybody being here today, given the circumstances, the weather, and everything that's going on in today's political climate. Being a libertarian, the first thing I get told is there's no way you're ever going to get elected. And I think that that's such a defeatist mindset in a world that preaches that we are the freest nation on the planet. I believe that there's a lot that can be done. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. I'm a father. I am a college graduated with a bachelor's degree in software engineering. I tend to be a little eccentric online. I tend to be abrasive. I tend to be somebody that takes a no-holds-barred approach to politics because it is defending our Constitution. It is supporting the people that have come before us that said, I want to be free. And if we continue to allow our politicians, not just in this state, but in every state around us, to continue to go unchallenged, to continue to have the questions that need to be raised on behalf of we the people, then we're only going to continue to face more tyranny, more oppression, more legislation, more statutes, more codes, more city ordinances, things of that nature. And how can we again tell our children and our grandchildren that we are actually in the freest nation if everything we've heard from every candidate that takes a third-party position, whether you're libertarian or not, is that we have problem after problem after problem after problem? At the end of the day, you're not going to sit here and support and defend a Constitution that does not exist in practice. It only exists in theory. It exists in the photo ops of candidates that sit here and don't talk about the actual problems. They talk about this dream world that they want to have. But let's talk about the reality. Let's talk about the facts. And let's use this debate tonight as a forum to help spread the libertarian message of freedom, prosperity, limited government, more people having power over their own lives, and how we can achieve that as a party. And if I'm given your nomination as governor, I give you my word that I will do everything to defend the individual and not the government. Thank you.
My name is Steve Devotny, born and raised in Winter, South Dakota. I've been a rancher the last 50 years. Have a wife, Denise. I married when I graduated high school. I have 2 daughters and 4 lovely granddaughters. I've been engaged in, like I say, ranching for my entire life. I run a spray business with a helicopter for the last 29 years. At some point, I've seen everything that you people are looking at today. The government continually keeps passing regulations, continually keeps interfering in your business. As a rancher, I've seen that basically from day one. There's always some new regulation, some new law, something they want to do to get money out of you. And I've fought it for years. As far as the libertarian viewpoint, I agree with a lot of what you believe in. I'm a lifelong Republican. I changed my voter registration in February because I'm fed up with corruption. And like I say, I've seen it. It's just a systematic pattern of two-party corruption. They control everything. They control the money. The little guy tries to say anything, they'll bash him, they'll insult him, they'll run him down, they'll try and ruin his name. You've seen some of the stuff on the blogs. The Republicans are attacking me very hard. Not because I've done anything wrong. I went through all the legal process. I have no criminal record. I have no protection orders. But they only tell one side of the story. I've written several letters in the last 20 years in opposition to government control. They don't like them, but I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I'm not afraid to stand up when it's time to stand up. I'll be the first to admit, I'm straightforward, I'm direct. People may find when I answer a question, it's straightforward, it's direct. Some people aren't used to, nor have they had the brutal truth spoken to them in that way. I was raised, you speak your mind, you speak truthfully, and you don't speak that much. You get to the point, get it over with, and move on. And that's what I try and do. So as running for governor, I'm doing this because I see the future for my children and my grandchildren, and your children and grandchildren being eroded. The people right here in this room, a lot of you weren't even born when I started ranching. And I understand what your philosophy is. I understand what your theory is. I understand the Libertarian Party has been criticized, run down, belittled for numerous things. You've been called potheads, you've been called radicals, you've been called extremists. I've been called an extremist because of my views. Never been called a pothead, because back when I was growing up, we had that. Individuals were involved in drugs. It was a choice then too. The ones that chose to do it did it. The ones that chose not to didn't do it. It was that simple. I watched the Vietnam soldiers nightly on the news being killed. I watched Kent State University protests. I've watched all those things. I've seen the protests. I've seen Woodstock. All that stuff, I've seen it from my own eyes on the television. Things back then, what they were doing is no different than what you're doing now. You have a different approach. There were the songs of anti-war protest. I watched veterans get spit in their face. People spit in their face. Disrespect. A veteran come home, they hid their uniform, they put on their clothes, they never mentioned a word about it. I've done close to $50,000 in donations for veterans organizations. I've flown 2 parades in Pierre for veterans. Without veterans, and Mr. Abernathy's one, I thank you for your service. Without veterans, we couldn't enjoy the freedoms we do now, nor could we enjoy the country we have. Everybody claims the country's going down the tubes. Well, to a point it is. But the freedoms that are being eroded away are being done slowly, systematically. They pass a law, well, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to worry about it. They pass another law. Well, it really doesn't affect me either, so I guess I won't worry about it. Until they pass a law that affects you, then you start worrying. Well, I've seen all that. I've been through it. And as a governor, if I'm so lucky to get that position, I know what they've done. I know where they're heading. I know how to head some of it off. Because if you don't nip it in the bud now, you, your children, more and more government intervention. The legislature this year went through 500 and some bills to pass new laws. If they'd passed everything they wanted to, those laws would affect everything you do. Now it's against the law to cell phones, it's against the law for this, it's against the law for that. People have the choice, the duty to be responsible for their own actions. I can't tell you to do something. You have to be responsible for your own actions. I'll take responsibility for anything I've done. I know you've seen things on blogs that are running me down. They're coming after me hard because they know how dangerous I am to them. So, and I'd like to get your vote if I possibly could. Thank you.
What would be the first thing you'd attempt to accomplish? And I've randomly selected Mr. Novotny to do this one. The first thing
initiate, if I get to be elected governor, I'm going to initiate a forensic audit into the corruption, the EB-5 scandal, the Gear Up scandal. You follow the money, you know what happened. What, when, where is taken care of. We've got 7 people recently, murder, suicide, alleged, dead in this state from government corruption. The EB-5 scam was done with the full knowledge of the Dugard, Rounds, and Shackley administration. There's signed contracts with the Attorney General, a law firm of Barnett, Siegel, and Schutz in Aberdeen, I believe. Jeff Speen was a partner in that law firm. He also was the one that the state contracted with, that law firm, to watch out for your rights. Now, Juke Bullen set up his private corporations. He was working for the state of South Dakota NSU as the head of EB-5. He created shell corporations, put in his own name, resigned his position from NSU, took over the administration running EB-5, all under the government eye, all with their approval. Shackley comes out and says, well, I got him for a felony. If he'd have followed the money trail, he'd have got a lot more people for a lot of felonies. He didn't bother to do that. He quit. He didn't investigate the offshore transfers of money. He didn't investigate the real reason Northern Beef went bankrupt. Of that scam, I believe Bullen's corporations skimmed off somewhere around $143 million off EB-5 investors. Other things they do is just get right on top of securing people that are not going to pass laws for every little thing you do. We can't afford that. We can't tolerate it. What's the other part of your question?
Oh, that was it.
I'm out? Okay.
Same question. First thing you would do is governor of South Dakota.
Perfect. Okay, so it's going to be hard for me to explain what I do on first day in a short amount of minutes because you're talking about a full 24 hours as governor. And it's easy to say what the previous administrations and previous political bans and corruption has there been. But you need a governor that's going to understand not just what's going on, but how they're doing what they're doing. And the reason they've been able to do the way they've been able to do is through deception of what is on a massively large scale. See, we get told that we're in the land of the free. We get told that we are the home of the brave. But if we speak out, we are shunned. If we say something that is against the political norm, we are ostracized, criticized, run through the mud. But at the end of it all, they do this only to keep us silent in a country where our First Amendment is if you see something wrong, you should say something. Use your freedom of speech to stand up and be an active citizen in your community to say, I see a political person that is acting in the name of government that is wrong. So if I am given the nomination to be not only your candidate but governor, and I can take the oath of office, the first day will be to define how we educate our people to how the previous administration got away with crimes to begin with. And there's multiple ways that they did this. And it's been happening since the federal level since 1913. And it's been a long, systematic plan to erode the greatest nation on this planet and to subsequently ruin our states as a whole. So on my first day, I would define how we move forward, educating our citizens to what this government has done before, to include the EB-5 scandal and all of the other subsequent corruption that has pertained. But what we need to do is be very honest with how this government did that. And that's why I am seeking this nomination, is so that way when Marty Jackley has to look me in the eyes again, he knows I'm serious when I tell him that I know how you enslave the people of South Dakota, and I know how to set the people free. You have to remove the capitis diminutia maxima status on the people, or we are all underneath the Commerce Clause. So on day one, I would remove us all from being subjected to the Commerce Clause, and the only people that can be regulated by a government that is limited are people that opt in to conduct commerce. Thank you.
Mr. Abernathy, name one thing you do to reduce government spending in South Dakota.
Well, see, a lot of people don't realize that we're an equity nation, and that in spending we have courts of equity. They talk about commerce and how this is conducted. So if you're a truck driver, a farmer, a rancher, a cattleman, a goat herder, a helicopter pilot, or whether or not you work at a donut shop or Walmart, or if you're an ironer, whatever industry you work in, you are subjected to this equity system. And they have taken what would be a perfect system and have our rights protected underneath the judicial branch. And they've taken that judicial branch and they've put it underneath the executive branch. And that executive branch is running carte blanche into whatever they want to do in the best interest of equity, not the people, in equity. So when you say, how can you take my vehicle from me? It's my vehicle. You're on my property. Well, you actually pay taxes to the state. You actually have to register your vehicle to the state. And all you are is a title holder. If that state wants to tax you to where you can't afford it anymore, they will. So how do I reduce government spending? I get rid of the people that are doing this to the people. Thank you.
Mr. Novotny, name one thing you do to reduce government spending in South Dakota.
You repeat that, please.
Name one thing you do to reduce government spending in South Dakota.
Okay. One thing I would do to reduce government spending in South Dakota is limit South Dakota government. Because the only way they can do anything is with your money. The federal government, the state of South Dakota really has no control over the federal government. We can't go back 100 years and rectify what the federal government's done. It's impossible. The only thing we can do is with state government is limit their control, limit their legislative power, go back to the way it should be. There has to be things in South Dakota that have to be paid for your schools, your roads. There has to be a certain amount of tax money paid to provide those services. You can limit those taxes by limiting the rules and regulations they place upon it. But you can't limit or totally wipe out taxation. You need it. You have to have some of it to make sure your infrastructure goes, your schools go, that type of stuff. It has to be there. It's a necessary evil. We may not like it, but it has to be there, or you wouldn't be able to motivate. You wouldn't be able to move, produce, work, anything in the state without infrastructure. You have to limit the government's desire to tax you for everything you do, but you still need to pay a certain amount of taxes to have infrastructure, schools, the basic needs. You can't eliminate it all, but you can reduce it by systematically taking away regulatory authority, nonsense laws that you pay for because they passed it. You can't have a cell phone, you can't look at, all these things, controlling your minor things in your life, they need to get rid of. But the major things, like I say, infrastructure and those things, we need to have some kind of tax system to take care of that.
Mr. Novotny, other gubernatorial candidates have proposed increasing criminal penalties as their way to combat South Dakota's meth epidemic. What would your proposal look like?
I'll start out right now telling you that passing laws to stop criminal activity doesn't work, never has, never will. You can't pass a law. If that's the case, passing a law for criminal activity, we'd have no murder, rape, or any crime. Laws don't do it. You have to look at the situation and control it with limited judicial power. Now, if you have somebody that's a murderer, he needs to be taken off the street. If you have somebody that's dealing harmful substances to your children, they have to be taken off the street. Those things have to be done to maintain a free and workable society. If people are allowed to break the law, your society's gone. But you can't pass a law that's going to eliminate people breaking the law. It's never worked. How many laws have you seen have been passed? We all have laws against murder. We have laws against theft. We have laws against it all. Have they stopped any of it? No. So you're not going to stop it by passing a law. You're going to stop it by enforcing the existing laws within reason that we have now. Arresting somebody for minor possession of marijuana or alcohol or things like that are petty offenses that really, yeah, they need to be dealt with, but not in a manner that ruins the individual's life or his job. You know, there are just certain things that have to be taken care of with law. But passing more laws to say, well, we're going to eliminate all crime or all murders or all rapes doesn't work, never has, never will. People have to have good moral character and run their community and their lives with their own moral character. You can't legislate morality. You can't legislate safety. It's that simple.
Just repeat the question.
Yes. Other gubernatorial candidates have proposed increasing criminal penalties as their way to combat South Dakota's meth epidemic. What would your proposal look like?
Okay, so as I reiterated earlier, and I'll reiterate now, we are all under a capitis diminutia maxima status, which means we are all equity slaves. And with that judicial branch not having the power of a jury in order to protect an individual rights, that power of that one individual, the thing that our Constitution is foundationally principled on, is that one juror is more powerful than the President of the United States, the governor of any state, any sitting senator, congressman, any representative, any judge, to include the Supreme Court. That the power of the jury was one vote not guilty is a vote for freedom. That if you couldn't convince beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody had committed a crime that produced corpus delicti, a victim, that the state should be compelled to show that there is a victim in every crime. So if you have an adult that chooses to take any substance, whether it's a Tide Pod or whether it's marijuana or whether it's meth, it does not matter, because the state will say that you've produced a victim within yourself. And that's how they have been getting away with this, is that you created a victim against yourself. You don't have that choice because you don't belong to you. So if we remove the courts of equity into the judicial branch, the rights of citizens will be protected by a jury, and we wouldn't even be talking about what anybody else is choosing to put in their body. Thank you.
Mr. Abernathy, if a conflict of interest arises in the future between your political philosophy or opinion and that of your constituents, how will you respond?
Part of my campaign, I've been working with people from different parts of the state, different parts of our country. I've been to different rallies all across this nation to help promote different causes and ideas. And one of the biggest ideas that came forth to me through one of my very good brothers is this statement, that Republicans are for corporate interests and privileges, Democrats are for state interests and privileges, and Libertarians are for the people's rights and interests over the state and corporate privileges and interests. If you put that philosophy first and realize that our elected officials, from the governor all the way down, are the people's servant, not their leader. If I'm elected governor, don't call me your leader. Call me your servant. That we the people have the power to utilize that office to stop those acting in the name of government from committing what is called civil treason. Now there's a lot of people that don't understand what I mean when I say civil treason. Treason is defined as helping a foreign enemy of the United States and aiding and comforting them. Civil treason, as I've defined it, is the people acting in the name of government committing crimes against the people of both the state and this country. So, if given the nomination to become your next governor and the first third-party candidate to win governor, I would remove all of these chains that have binded us into this form of slavery that most people are just, to be honest, too apathetic to care about. Thank you.
Well, I would recognize there's a potential conflict of interest before it gets that far. And you have to play ahead of the game to see what's going on. As far as eliminating everything under the sun, we have to have some organization, we have to have some constructive management so people can live in a society that's safe, workable, but still stays away from your individual freedoms. We have to have an organized structure to make society work. Every society throughout history has had some type of organized society. The Romans, the Banshees, for no better word. Everybody's had the French, all these past cultures. The caveman, there was all an order that allowed the society to flourish and survive. So there has to be some structure for the entire community, but the individual rights need to be left and not infringed on. That's what our Constitution says. We're not supposed to infringe on other people's rights, and that's what we have to maintain. But there has to be an organized society to make things work.
Mr. Novotny, what are your thoughts on medical and recreational marijuana?
Okay, again, I grew up in a little different time frame than you guys. Medical marijuana, I'm for it. It needs to be done in a controlled, safe environment, so the product that's put out there is safe to the people that are going to use it. Recreational marijuana, I've got mixed emotions. Just like I've got mixed emotions with alcohol. Some people can consume it and have no trouble. Some people can't. So there you live in a situation where how do you deal with that? How do you deal with somebody drunk driving through town where your children are potential victims to be killed? Same under the influence of drugs. Your children have the potential to be killed or injured somebody that's under the influence. So, yeah, if you want to take marijuana, smoke it yourself, stay off the roads, maintain a civil tone. Not worried about it. Same with alcohol. You want to drink, maintain a civil tone. I'm not worried about it. But when you exceed that barrier that makes you a detriment to some innocent person or innocent person's property, there has to be a control measure there, so that doesn't happen.
I might actually have to take the full 3 minutes on this topic because, again, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I worked with Veterans for Safe Access in California to discuss about medical marijuana for veterans as well as just, recreational use. And for those that know, California and Washington are both recreational states, and I've lived in both. So I've seen it, not only from the business perspective, from the entrepreneurial spirit that it brings, from the new industries that it creates, to the 50,000 products that hemp and marijuana can produce. So I find it absolutely repugnant to a free and open society that we are sitting here, even still having this debate in 2018, that my grandma and grandpa they don't understand it. But here I am at 32 years old, can fully tell you that marijuana has never been the cause of one single death, but yet it's the big don't talk about it plant. But yet marijuana is somehow akin to a Schedule I drug while we have all the statistics and data to back up that alcohol is far more dangerous. So I find the hypocrisy of this government to be absolutely the telltale sign that it is just repugnant to any free and open society. Now, on top of that, we have a denied access for medical patients here in South Dakota for children that you've seen in other states. Multiple children that are benefiting from multiple different types of oils from the CBD. I think denying the fact that this is a medicine in 2018 only causes more death and harm and discourages those that could seek its medical usage to deter and to move away from our state. See, you know, when I went to meet Marty Jackley up in Eureka, I know that this man is adamantly opposed to this. And I know that it's very clear that I am adamantly for it. But at the end of the day, the truth of this is what should win. Not your fear of talking about it. Not your fear that the government's going to find out, oh, you might be one of them crazy potheads. No, we are actually being realistic and honest in the world we live in. And to continue to deny this is only to set us back further. It only gives legislators more room to propagate laws and regulations and who wins and who loses and who's going to get the big permits like they're doing in North Dakota today. If I'm elected governor of South Dakota, that's not going to be what happens. We are going to have entrepreneurial spirit and just grow an industry that needs to be done from the ground up. And the fertile grounds that South Dakota has would create wealth that this state has never seen before in its history. So I think to sit here and say that we're talking about whether it's taboo to talk about this or not is irrelevant. Because you can't prove, and this government has failed to prove time and time again, that this plant does any harm to anybody. And that it is only sought to aid people, comfort people, and to help cure different ailments that they have. And I think our doctors, especially our doctors of veterans, need to be able to openly discuss this with our citizens and our people to say this could be a viable option to you. And they can't do that if we continue to allow the Republicans to rule the people. Thank you.
Mr. Abernathy, if you could eliminate one law that restricts personal freedom, what would it be and why?
Again, I'll go back to the capitis diminutia maximus status. We're all equity slaves. We're all of us. Every one of us. Everyone sitting in this room, everyone out there at Applebee's, everybody sitting out there in the world at a red light, everyone stuck at home that could possibly watch this. We are all equity slaves. It doesn't sound good to hear. And I'm criticized, demonized, and ostracized because I know the truth. But at the end of the day, you want that in somebody that's going to be a governor for the people, that will put themselves in the individual shoes, that has been to the places the individual has been, and say, I understand you. And that's why I'm running, and that's what I will do. If I am eliminating one law, I'm eliminating the capitis diminutia maximus status they've placed us under. Thank you.
To eliminate one law that restricts personal freedom, what would it be and why?
If I could eliminate one law that restricts personal freedom, I guess it would be fishing and hunting license, because there's nothing you can harm there. That restricts personal freedom. But as far as being a capital-driven or equity slave, I don't think anybody in this country is an equity slave. You've got the right to work as hard as you want and make your business grow as much as you want. It's what you put into your business. I've worked on a ranch my entire life. I created my spray business. I've had a good life. I know there's people in this room right now that have their own business, their own small business. They want to create that, they want to keep it going, they want to build it. So saying that you're a slave of equity, that's like saying you're a slave of eating. You have to eat to survive. You have to work to survive. You have to have a business that pays your bills, takes care of your family, provides the things you want in life. So I wouldn't eliminate stuff like that. But petty laws, yeah, there's a lot of petty stuff out there that you got to have a seatbelt. You've got to can't use your cell phone under certain conditions. Those are things that could be eliminated. We didn't have them when I was a kid. We didn't have to wear seatbelts. We rode in the back of pickups. Nobody got hurt. But if you start emphasizing every little thing, that's when society loses its freedom. Society doesn't lose its freedom if you have the ability to work, grow your business, make all the money you want. Or on the other hand, you can sit back and do nothing. That's your choice.
Mr. Novotny, what experience and skills would you bring to the table as South Dakota's next governor?
I think the experience and skills I'd bring to the governor's office is I've been a rancher, I've been a small business owner. I've seen what's happened to people throughout the state. I know how hard it is to create a business, how hard it is to run a business. I know how hard it is to raise a family. Start out when you have nothing. Raise your family. Keep them safe. Get them educated. I've got that under my belt. My children are raised. The other thing I've got is experience dealing with politicians. They hate me because I'm not afraid to speak up to them. I've written numerous letters against some of the things they do. So I think I'd go into the governor's office and maintain a civil tone as well as keep them from infringing more upon your rights.
Mr. Abernathy, what experience and skills would you bring to the table as South Dakota's next governor?
Well, again, I'm 4 years United States Marine Corps veteran. I got out as a corporal with an honorable discharge from Camp Pendleton, California. My job in the Marine Corps was to be a combat engineer, 1371. And to put it best, to explain it to you guys what that means, is my recruiter told me we blow shit up, to be frank about it. I was part of a route clearance platoon in Iraq and Afghanistan. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I pursued a bachelor's degree in software engineering, where again, I was around people, leadership, structure. Instant obedience and willingness to orders was the name of that game in the Marine Corps. But it taught you how to respect a person based on a person and a rank based on a rank. Respect is earned, never given. And so a skill set you have to have is to be able to know that when you're coming, that you have that tone, that people will give you the respect to listen. They don't have to hate you. I work with Democrats in some states, Republicans in others, because we all have a political spectrum. So a skill set that I bring is to say, I agree with you on this hand, and I agree with you on this side. But at the end of the day, we have to find that common ground for the people. And we have to be honest about what our government does and what our two-party duopoly does. So I bring an education that says, I know how this system works. I will not let a Republican or a Democrat tell me otherwise when I know the truth. And we need to have somebody that's going to speak the truth on behalf of we the people. So, thank you.
Mr. Abernathy, how would you advance the liberty movement should you be elected governor of South Dakota?
I hope to be the first Libertarian candidate nominated for governor by the state, by the people of the state, which will inspire other people to step up, run, whether it's your county seat or whether it's take a bold step and run for governor, or I don't even know, maybe run for president. But at the end of the day, we have to do something. You can stay at home, like Mr. Novotny has said here, or you can go out and you can be the change you want to see in this world. Not to sound cliche, but that is what it is. And you have to get up and you have to advance that liberty, put that torch on your back and say, I'm going to stand up against the people that oppress us. I'm going to learn everything I can about my enemy, and then I'm going to seize that opportunity to attack them where they're vulnerable, and that's on the truth, because they have to lie in order to keep us enslaved. And again, you can say we're not equity slaves, Mr. Novotny, but that's not the truth. The truth is we are all under the Commerce Clause, and until we wake up and address that as an adult, not just a party, then there is nowhere that we're going to advance to. We're going to continue to have a turnout that is minimal, even given conditions of weather. The point being that we have to be the party that speaks the educated truth, and if we don't have that, we don't have a party. Thank you.
Okay, as far as advancing the liberty movement, if I was elected governor, taking the step I've taken right now is the first step in advancing. I renounced my Republican, lifelong Republican Party to change to the Libertarian Party, because I can see the corruption, the graft, the control in that party. The Libertarian Party has good ideas. The Democrats have good ideas. The Republicans have good ideas. You need to mold all that into one. Sort it out and make sure you get the best of all those ideas. In my experiences in ranching, I've dealt with a lot of people. In my spray business, I've dealt with a lot of people. And you have to be able to deal with them, give them the product they want, let them make their own decision, work with them. Because I have a lot of spray customers who want to use certain things. We talk about it, we discern what they want to use, that's what we use. It's no different in government. You people out here, tell your legislatures what you want. They have the right to listen to you and do what you want. Instead, they take it as, I'm elected now, I can do anything I want. That's not the way it works. I work for people. I know what they expect. I have people work for me. I know what I expect of them. I'd advance your freedoms quite literally. You would gain a lot of access to a more party base. I can tell you right now, you've already gained access to a party base in my hometown, in my area. I had people ask me, is this going to be on TV tonight? I said, I have no idea. We support you. We're tired of the corruption. We're tired of the two system. We're tired of people not listening to us. I've already advanced your party. And I'll do more if I get elected governor.
Mr. Novotny, how did you first get involved with the Libertarian Party, and what made you decide to tackle the governorship of South Dakota?
I first got involved in the Libertarian Party. I was thinking about running for governor as independent. I looked at your websites, I looked at some of your philosophies. I've talked to some of your people. It was easier to get a nomination or get a vote number of 250 than it is to get 3,000 votes they require for an independent. An independent has to get twice as many votes or 3 times as many votes as anybody else. Your voting requirements or your petition requirements are far less. It's far easier to get those signatures. I talked to some of your people, and I decided it's time to bail out on the mainstream party. I seen the court case where it was ruled unconstitutional, the restrictions they put on both the independents and the constitutional party and the Libertarian Party. We shouldn't have those kind of restrictions. You should be able to run for office anytime you want without restrictions that keep you from even getting off the doorstep. And that's what they've done. They've passed laws to keep the average citizen to not even be involved in politics because they can't afford to. They can't get the number of signatures. They can't get that kind of support. But now that you have your court case, which the law was unconstitutional, as many other laws that have been passed are. That's why I got involved, to help emphasize and to move stuff like this forward. There's a lot of unconstitutional laws out there. And I see this party as a benefit and a way to help limit that.
Mr. Abernathy, how did you first get involved with the Libertarian Party, and what made you decide to tackle the governorship of South Dakota?
Put my foot there. All right, so my first experience with the Libertarian Party was to deny that this was ever a party I'd be a part of. To be perfectly honest, I voted for Barack Obama. I'm not a lifetime Republican. I voted for Barack Obama not once but twice while serving in the United States Marine Corps. And after that, I will say I voted for Donald J. Trump because I see the middle of the road as where you should put your vote. And because at the end of the day, you don't have to say this party's all right and this party's all right, because that produces that too far left and too far right conversation. So my first experience with the Libertarian Party was through a group that we did called Restoring Freedom. And for many of you that don't know Cash Jackson, he did a march from Washington to D.C. I was honored enough to join him. And we raised awareness about the issues of family law courts and the inequities that are taking place because of the courts of equity being underneath the executive branch, denying rights to the people without trial by jury, where civil asset forfeiture is the name of the game. So Mr. Novotny, if you ever had somebody call CPS on you, you could lose your ranching business overnight. So you, of course, are a slave as well. You're just lucky to not have to be participating in these courts of equity, unlike some of us. Some of us have lost our children to different crimes that the government will not recognize, like paternity fraud. And the only people that were willing to come up and talk to me about these issues were so-called libertarians. And I said, well, what are these people always wanting to know about? Why I'm talking about these things? Well, it turns out that if you really put yourself in the middle, put yourself in the people's shoes, you have to see it from a bigger perspective, that it's the only morally right thing to do when the politics of today's time gets too extreme. That's how you reform a government constitutionally, with permission from the people. And you're right, Mr. Novotny, this government does make it extremely hard to run. So on January 3rd, I went down to the Secretary of State's office and I publicly declared my candidacy for governor of South Dakota. And I appreciate you joining last Monday. So at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to still preach about these things because the Libertarian Party has empowered me. And we need to look at it as a youthful opportunity. If I'm given the nomination, I've been invited to speak and debate against my political opponents, should I get the nomination, at the South Dakota Schools for Mines and Technology. That's Marty Jackley's home turf. So I get to walk into his home turf and bring the truth proverbially right down his throat. And if I'm given that opportunity, I will use every skill and talent and ability I have to promote and push forward this libertarian agenda of promoting freedom, prosperity. The individual is above the government, that this government works for you, not the other way around. That's the problem, is that we've had too many people that it doesn't affect you until it affects you and you realize nobody else cares. We need a governor that's going to care for the people. Thank you.
Mr. Abernathy, what's the best resource for people who want to dive in deeper on how the government truly functions?
Don't go down the YouTube rabbit hole. Get involved. Challenge. When I had a problem with Marty Jackley, I took it right to Marty Jackley. When I have a problem with a representative, I take it to my representative and I challenge them. I challenge you to show me that you're constitutional. Show me that you practice what you preach in your campaign ads. Show me that this government is by, for, and of the people. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't get my call. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't return my email. Oh, I'm sorry, you think that this is too controversial, so you can't speak about it because you're afraid. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using my First Amendment to tell my elected representative, and you won't represent me? Well, guess what? These times need to change. And by looking at the people in this room that are running for these state offices, if the people come to you, I would expect you to be their voice against a tyrannical form of government, because it is only silence of the people that allows this tyranny to continue. It allows victims to go oppressed without there being a way for them to have an actual voice other than looking crazy, other than being ostracized in the mainstream media, other than being looked down upon and wondering what it's going to say in this tabloid blog post of some Democrat left-wing extremist on a Saturday. It's not about that. It's about the individual giving that power to that representative. Say, if you're going to consent, if I'm going to consent to have you be my representative, you have to be my representative. You have to render honest service, and when you don't, I'm going to fire you. Because that's how you're supposed to have a constitutional government. Thank you.
What's the best resource for people who want to dive in deeper on how the government truly functions?
The best resource?
Yeah, the best resource for how people who want to dive in deeper on how the government truly functions.
Well, probably the best resource for getting into what concerns you or your needs or wants would simply be to address it in a civil, calm manner. Talk to people. In my business, I talk to a lot of people. I've talked to my legislatures. I've talked to my county commissioners. I've talked to our representatives in Washington. They're going to listen to you. They're not always going to do what you want, because they're going to listen to other people as well. And what they're going to do is take all of those ideas, run them through the washing machine, sort them out, and come up with the most viable and the most public input they get. Everybody's going to have an idea. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Those don't change. But at the end of the day, you need to do what's best for the majority, because somewhere along the line, and I've been lost in the shuffle myself, you're not going to get everything you want. You need to run this situation for the most safety of your children, your family, your personal lives, and that's what most people want to do. And I think if I get elected governor, I can address those concerns. We have a reservation out west here. I'm sure none of you people realize, last year alone, 16 kids were murdered. That never made the news. One kid walked out of the Siouxland Big Crow Center, and the drug dealers shot him on sight, then run over him. That never made the news. There's a problem out there. They need representation. They need help. Just like there's a problem in Sioux Falls. There's a problem in Winter, South Dakota. You have to look at everybody in South Dakota and then take the best from everybody's got to say and formulate some plan that's going to help everybody.
Mr. Novotny, what do you see as the civil liberties issue most greatly affecting the people of South Dakota, and how do you plan to work on this as governor?
There are several issues that are affected on your civil liberties. Your right to free speech. Everybody wants to have free speech, but when you have it, some people are offended. If you say something, you're going to offend some group, or somebody says something to you, they're going to offend you. Everybody jumps on it. The least little thing, people jump on it when you say something. There's not a person in this room, myself included, that hasn't said something you probably shouldn't have. But you do it. It's human nature. So our free speech, and the government, by the way, doesn't guarantee you free speech. It guarantees you the government should not infringe on your right to free speech. So there's other things, your freedom, your personal freedoms, just like getting in your car. You've got to have a seatbelt. Your cell phone, we're going to regulate that. They want to regulate every little thing you do. And everybody says, well, yeah, it's not that big a deal. The seatbelt law started out here a few years ago. Well, it's just going to be kids under 18, nobody else. Then it's people in the front seat, adults. Then it's everybody. So your liberties are slowly chipped away. And you can stop that by not having your head in the sand and say, well, that law doesn't affect me, I'm going to ignore it. Well, eventually it does affect you. It affects your children. It affects your ability to do your business. It affects your lifestyle. It affects everything. So you need to start looking at small laws, because pretty soon they accumulate into a big problem. And eliminating that and letting people run their freedoms, their personal lives the way they choose, as long as it's within the moral standards of society, is the way things need to be.
Mr. Abernathy, what do you see as the civil liberties issue most greatly affecting the people of South Dakota, and how do you plan to work on this as governor?
Is deprivation of rights under color of law. That's admiralty law. That's what I talk about when I say the fringe on the flag. I get called the fringe candidate because of this. But for most people, they don't realize that this is a legal notice done intentionally to give you that legal notice when you walk into a courtroom to tell you that it represents no country or constitution in that courtroom. That's how they violate our fundamental liberty interests. That's how the state can contract with CPS to remove children without warrant, without a actual threat of violence to a child or harm to a child, just on the mere spoken word. So when people do speak up and say something and it isn't accurate, that preponderance of that evidence allows them to produce a capitis diminutia status based on that less than perfect weight of evidence. Just because I can say something about you doesn't mean it's true. And that's what these courts are doing. So I find that to be one of the biggest civil liberty interests. I also find that what this government does to Native Americans across this country is a crime. That we have violated treaties with natives, with First Nations people that have been here long before we were the United States of America. And in order for us to be on this land, we have to honor those treaties. Have you ever heard of the Indian Child Welfare Act? That's where they can just come into the reservation and take your children based on what? Based on what? So we are living in the most critical civil rights violations of our time, and we need elected people that will represent the facts of this, not hide from it in their offices under an unconstitutional flag. Thank you.
All right, now we'll have a question from each of the candidates to their opponent, and we'll start with a question from Mr. Abernathy.
Mr. Novotny, I would like to know, if you are given the nomination today, how do you plan on addressing the capitis diminutia maxima status with Marty Jackley, Kristi Noem, or Billy Sutton?
Well, I assume you're talking about what you've been talking about is you feel the country is totalitarian and ruining your private life with everything the government does. I assume your position is pretty much that. Okay. What I'll discuss with Marty Jackley and all the other candidates is simple. Let's address the way you're handling the law. Let's address the perjury in the courts. Because they couldn't get away with the things they do if they would enforce the perjury laws. Like Mr. Abernathy said, somebody can make an accusation against you. May not be true. They could sign a paper. May not be true. They take your children away. They take your guns away. They take a lot of stuff away. But when it's proven those accusations were false, nobody enforces the perjury clause. If they start enforcing the perjury laws, a lot of this stuff would go away on its own. I understand people have fights in their marriages. I understand people have fights on the street. I understand little kids have fights on the playground. In Winter, South Dakota, we have little kids on the playground filing protection orders because there was a pushing match between two second graders. That's ridiculous. We have people every day of the week getting thrown out of their house because somebody filed a protection order. And protection orders were designed for abuse of their spouses. But they have proven, state study or national studies have proven, a lot of these are false. Somebody gets thrown out, they lose all their rights. That stain stays with them for their life, or until they clear it up. You try and get somebody charged with perjury on a false statement. The courts, the judges, the lawyers ignore it. And that's one thing I will address. Our court system needs overhauled. We need to enforce the basic laws. If you can make a statement that's false and ruin somebody's life, you need to be held accountable for that. It's perjury. That, plain and simple. And I'll discuss that with those people. I'll discuss a lot of things with them. But truth and honesty is the way to run your business and your life. I've done that for over 50 years. I don't have problems with my customers. And there were some issues on the blogs that addressed what Mr. Abernathy's talking about, false accusations. If you bother to check the record, they've all pretty much gone away. I had one individual aptly charged with perjury. He pled guilty. In the last case that they put up, it's going back for a perjury charge. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
And now a question from Mr. Novotny to Mr. Abernathy.
Yes, Mr. Abernathy, I'd like you to clarify your position on basic needs of the community. You say everything is economy driven or equity driven. Things are going to hell in a handbasket. Why do you feel everything is equity driven when people across this state have their own businesses, their own jobs? They're doing quite well, some of them. Some aren't.
So if I'm to understand your question correctly, is why do I say that everything is based on equity? It's because it is. When we started this conversation today, we pointed out that your car can be taken when it's your property. You're taxed beyond belief. If they come out with a new bill like they just did, upping 1% for taxes for schools, guess who pays it? You don't have really any say on that. And they're not really bringing in any other new ideas to solve these problems, now are they? But it's all driven on equity. How many terms can we actually point out in our politicians' languages that are actually court of equity terms? That it's called legalese. That's how these politicians through the State Bar of South Dakota, who was just here 2 days ago, get away with these crimes. They created a language that sounds like English, but it's not. It's actually a law of contracts, again, done through equity courts, where they are underneath the judicial branch. So that way, when somebody tells a lie about you, Mr. Novotny, the judge gets to decide if that's a lie or not a jury. And how does this affect our lowest community? Because you should have, where if there's no violent crime, these courts were designed that if a business owner like yourself did a bad service to me, and I could show a judge the actual corpus delicti, the damages done by your business on my land, I could then seek that equity claim through that court. But if I call you a child abuser, then that judge is now deciding whether or not your liberty interest is at stake. And that's where, again, at our localist of levels, these courts are operating this way. And as governor of South Dakota, I will change that. If you're accused of a crime, if somebody speaks ill of you and does it with malicious intent to ruin your business, Mr. Novotny, you're going to have a jury trial that decides whether or not that person's lying. And if they are, there are charges for that. And that sheriff, that highest law enforcement officer in your county, will uphold that perjury law because a jury found them guilty, a jury of their peers. And that's what we don't have in this country, is a jury of our peers. And tonight you are my jury of my peers in the Libertarian Party, and I hope to get your nomination. Thank you.
We'll now conclude with closing statements from each candidate, beginning with Mr. Novotny.
Okay, first off, I disagree with Mr. Abernathy's position that you can't get a trial by jury. You can request it. This country's had that. You can request trial by jury. That simple. Other than that, I think as far as the governorship in the state, it needs to address the corruption, the graft, the good old boys club, not listening to the people, and a lot of that needs to be through a court overhaul. They don't listen to you. They've declared I am 22 unconstitutional. Now, Marty Jackley had the opportunity to read that and tell us right up front if it was unconstitutional or not. He waited until after the fact. Just like the election laws. They pass those, unconstitutional. You have lawyers that keep passing laws and then adding to them every time they get a chance. So it corrupts the system, confuses the average individual. The average individual in this room cannot go into a court of law and defend himself because there's too many traps, too many loopholes. If it's back to a common language, simple, legal system, you can do that. And you have right to demand trial by jury. And so that right's never been taken away from you. It's only if you give it up and say, I don't want a trial by jury.
Okay, so to close this off, Mr. Novotny, you're wrong again, sir, with all due respect. How many people know who Representative Pischke is out there in our legislature here, right? Why is he working on a shared parenting bill that'll make it so our courts grant 50-50 custody to cases of child custody cases that are that's a starting ground, where there's no proven criminal corpus delicti crimes adjudicated against somebody by a criminal jury if you've committed a crime. What I'm talking about is our civil and liberty interests being denied in courts of equity. I'm going to say that if I'm elected governor of South Dakota, that all fundamental liberty interest cases and civil right cases are to be decided by a jury. So if you have a child today and you divorce in a year, unless there is a corpus delicti victim of a crime in that relationship, there is a guaranteed right to an equitable shared relationship with those parents and those children. That's a fact. So again, you can have a trial by jury if you're accused of murder. But if you're accused of a heinous crime to a minor child by allegation, if you're accused by a neighbor through CPS claim, you don't get that same right to a jury. Because again, it's in a court of equity where your right to a trial by jury does not exist. And you have to petition, and then you fall into those loopholes. You fall into that nobody will help you. There's nobody out there to do something that can stop this from happening to people. We need a governor that not only has lived it, walked with the people that have been hurt by it, that will sit here and know that you have a governor that will defend you from that office as the people. And I thank you for your time, and I hope to be that governor. Thank you.
I'd like to thank both candidates for participating in tonight's debate and wish each the best of luck for the upcoming vote to become the Libertarian nominee.
However the governor race turns out, I just want to throw out to you guys, if there's any interest at all, whoever doesn't get the nomination for governor, there is that opportunity to run for another office, lieutenant governor, whatever it may be. So again, I just want to throw that out there if that is of any interest to you guys. So whoever wouldn't get it, if you do have that interest, we would obviously just have to do another vote, take care of it that way.